Hi, hello, welcome to my living room. My name is Julian Greystoke, and today we are doing a sort of 3-for-1 book review. In December, I decided to read, or rather listen to, indie books, because it was Indie-Cember. Even though I didn't participate in the overall Indie-Cember thing that comes with like a bingo card that you're supposed to fill out and maybe you can win a prize, I didn't do that. I just wanted to dedicate myself to reading or listening to indie books in December, and I was super happy to find a database, which I will try to remember to link you below. If I forget, just remind me, which allowed me to find indie books that had audiobook versions. So that was really exciting because anybody who knows me knows that I don't really have a lot of free time to sit and read, so I love to listen to audiobooks while I'm at work. I only managed 3 books, kind of technically 4, I'll talk about that at the end, but they were all indies and we're just gonna review them bam bam bam, 1, 2, 3, and hopefully this won't go too long. 2 of them I have written down in my notebook, and then one of them I just kind of was like, I don't know, I'll remember. And they also kind of go in order of my enjoyment, like ascending order. So first I read Wicked Descent. I'm trying to bring it up on Goodreads so I can read you the synopsis, but Goodreads is failing. So I guess I'll just give you my synopsis, what I can remember. Wicked Descent is a fairly standard sort of urban fantasy, I guess, kind of story. Girl moves to a new town, finds out that she may have powers and might be more than she always assumed she was. Pretty standard, and it did follow most of the tropes that come along with that. So let's look at my notes. Right, my very first note is, feels a lot like most girl moves to new town and discovers she has powers stories. Our main character kind of pulls a Bella Swan when she first gets to her new school. She's immediately very popular. It's a small town. They're excited to have a new girl. But later something happens in the plot that makes her suddenly not popular with the school anymore, and they go full nuclear with it. Like, they go from, hey, she's pretty cool, to absolutely hating her. And I mean everyone absolutely hates her. And I just think it was a little bit overdone, like a little bit too extreme. Like everyone from the popular girls to the lowliest of nerds is willing to shove her in the hallway. The thing that she did, not really worthy, in my opinion, of the ire of the entire school. I do like that this book subverts a few tropes here and there, including the love triangle trope that you're expecting, so that was nice. But we also have the classic trope of girl keeps secrets, and things would be 1,000% easier for her in this book, would be about 2 pages long, if she actually talked with anyone about any of this at any point. The writing in this book was serviceable. The author is pretty prolific from my understanding, so they have the practice. And while none of the writing in this book stood out to me as excellent, also none of it stood out as terrible or terribly clunky either. It did its job. I will also say that this book felt kind of nostalgic and was a pretty good palate cleanser. Like, if you're looking for something that's not really gonna give you any surprises or anything too difficult, just to cleanse your palate after maybe a book hangover, then this one might be for you. This will bring back all your fond memories of being in high school and sitting down to read the latest paranormal whatever. A big theme in this book, possibly the only theme in this book, it's called Dark Descent, so it's kind of about this character doing a will she won't she turn to the dark side, is Luke Skywalker gonna go evil thing. So it's kind of convenient that everyone at the school starts to hate her, because that really helps push her towards the dark side a little bit more. And it's a good thing they do, because the main character is pretty bland, and one of her only character traits could be summed up as is good. She's nice. The characterization of a lot of the characters, especially side characters, is really thin, and there's really only 2 characters, the main one and another one that she interacts with a lot, that get any real substance. Unfortunately, the one who suffers the most from this is the mom, who is half the time an insane helicopter parent, and the other half a kind, reasonable mom. I thought the book was gonna go somewhere with this, like it was leading up to something being going on with the mom, but really, no. There is also some telling rather than showing in this book. This book is really interested in just kind of keeping it going. There is a cat in this book, and if you know what happens to cats in books, yep, this one too. If I was the main character of this book and what happened to the cat happened in front of me, the book would have been over right away. The villain would be dead. There is a twist at the end of this book that I 1000% guessed immediately. And I went through the whole book being like, no, they're not really gonna do this, are they? Oh, they did. But maybe if you are actually reading this as the intended audience, i.e. a teenager, the twist might not seem quite so obvious. And of course, because it's a will she, won't she turn to the dark side, there is a very, very cliche join me, Luke scene that had me rolling my eyes. But I could definitely see this book sitting on a shelf next to all of those other sort of average and samey YA books that we were reading in the early 2000s, early to mid 2000s, when paranormal YA was really hitting its stride. So if you want that nostalgia and you just want a palate cleanser, this might be a book that you'll enjoy. The next book, I didn't write anything down in my notebook, and it was kind of an odd one. I kind of checked it out on impulse. It's called Red Winter. And have you ever wished that you could read an anime, but like not in the form of a manga? You wanted to read it in the form of a novel. Then this is the exact book for you. I'm going to try to pronounce the name of an anime series, and you can laugh at my pronunciation, okay? I'm going to be looking at my screen. Have you ever heard of the anime Hiro no Kakera? Because that's what this book basically is. If you like Shrine Maiden falls in love with fox yokai, this. I don't know really what else to tell you. The main character is preparing to be for a Japanese god. Actually, one you might be familiar with. That of Okami, which is actually in a video game, I believe for the Wii. So, yeah, she's preparing to be a vessel for that god. I guess that's the thing. I didn't really know, but it's fine. She doesn't really completely understand what all that entails until she encounters a fox yokai and she makes a deal with him. It's like, if you are familiar with this type of anime, everything is sounding very familiar, and it does not deviate. There's a lot of damseling, there's a whole lot of pining and like barely having moments with each other, and she has powers, but often she doesn't quite manage to use them unless she needs to save him because he's already taken an unreasonable amount of damage. There's even a scene with gushing blood. This book is an anime in written form, and if that is what you want, this book will deliver. If you are hoping that this book will deviate in any way from the tropes and that formula, it will not. I am familiar enough with that type of anime to be a little bit bored and disappointed sometimes. Like, sometimes I was like, okay, this is a little trash, but it's my trash. I like it. And it was well written. I think the author did a good job of making sure everything was understandable, even if you're not familiar with the culture. I don't know if this is own voices. I suspect not. This book is very, very niche and is just not going to be up everyone's street. But if any of that sounds intriguing to you, or even if you're not terribly familiar with that type of anime, and you like that stretched out anime, will they, won't they? This might be the book for you. And finally, we're going to talk about Duel of Fire, which I liked best of all of these. Duel of Fire takes place in a fantasy world, but it seems to be a pretty low magic fantasy world. There is kind of magic, but it comes from elements, and only very specific people can use these elements. And in the kingdom where we follow our main character, they really only have the element of fire, and only certain fire workers can use it. Our main character's father is a fire worker, but she is a huge disappointment in that she cannot work the fire, and so she tries to find her own way by becoming a duelist, which she absolutely loves, and she wants to win big dueling competitions and get sponsors, and she wants to separate herself from the life of her father, who is kind of like a blacksmith. He makes these really specialized lamps. Anyway, not important. She ends up being tasked with being the dueling partner for the somewhat rebellious and lazy prince, and the book just kind of goes from there. The world in this book is pretty well built. I felt it had a fairly even amount of world building for what I tend to prefer, which is not oversaturated in it, but also not non-existent. However, there was a lot of, especially at the beginning of the book, of as you know type conversations where characters would explain things to each other that they definitely already knew for the sake of the reader. I really liked how this author created characters. Even the side characters had stuff going on. There was one character near the beginning that I immediately latched onto, and he's in like 2 scenes, and for me that's my sign that the author is definitely pretty good at writing characters, as if I'm like, I like you, and I like you, and I want a whole book book about you. I love that the main character of this story is a badass duelist, but you totally believe it because it is very clear that she works incredibly hard for everything that she's gotten. She trains, she practices, and she works. So it's not just a matter of, hey, my main character is a badass, believe me, she took a lesson one time. No, you see this character and how much effort she puts into her passion. This book does do something that I have complained about in some of Jenna Moressi's books, in that it occasionally slips into modern slang. Not nearly as often as, like, say, The Savior's Champion, but it does every now and then, and it kicks you out of the story. And it made me wonder if we were dealing with a world that was, like, based off of our world, and maybe it was one of those situations where, you know, the apocalypse happened and then we came back and everything was kind of medieval. I did have a little bit of trouble with the world building in that respect, in that I didn't completely 100% understand where we were at all times with technology and slang and stuff like that. This main character throws off some serious Katniss vibes. She's very focused and serious about what she wants in her life, but she learns that she needs to get better at showmanship to succeed. She has to win over people who will sponsor her as a duelist, or she's never going to be able to make any money at her passion, which means that she'll have to start working in her parents' fireworking shop. So if that kind of personality in a main character appeals to you, this one might be right up your street. She does have a dueling coach who is an interesting character, but he kind of does that thing where you're like, obviously he knows something, but he just won't tell anyone, and you kind of wonder why, and you just sometimes want to shake characters and be like, talk to each other! There is in this book mention of a Fire Lord, which of course just makes me think of Avatar: The Last Airbender. I really like that the romantic interest finds the main character the hottest when she is saving his ass. I appreciate that so much. There is a fairly predictable plot point in this book that I was really hoping the author wasn't going to go for. I'm not surprised that the author went there, but I am disappointed. I love that this book had no time for these common YA tropes that we see so often. There were no ridiculous Stephen King style bullies to harass our main character, and there was no like mean girl on girl hate. I love the dynamic that she forms with her rival, who is another female duelist, and at first you think it is going to be that girl bully kind of dynamic, but instead it forms into something else, and I absolutely loved it. In fact, my favorite character is her rival character. That girl is a showman. I have a real soft spot for characters like a Megamind who are all about presentation. I did kind of laugh. This story takes place in the mountains, and their kingdom is called Vertigon. Like vertical. And I was like, was that like a placeholder name, and then the author just never replaced it? Because every time I heard Vertigon, I was laughing. I also liked that this book had politics, but it was kind of at my favorite level for politics in a story. It was like politics level 1. It's definitely happening in the background and you get glimpses of it every now and then, but we are not bogged down with the politics. One big thing that did kind of kill this book for me and lowered its score on Goodreads is that it doesn't really end, it just kind of leaves off, trails off. Like there's a climax kind of, but then there isn't a cliffhanger necessarily, but the book just is like, okay, now you need to go read the next book. It doesn't bother wrapping really anything up. It's really clear that this book is just supposed to lead into the second book, and that annoyed me because I like a book that can stand alone even if it's in a series. Not that I need to have every question answered and every thread tied up if it's going to be part of a series, but some of them should be at the end of each book. So there you go. Those were the 3 indie books that I read in December. Now I did mention there was going to be kind of a little like caveat to this, and for that I am adding, I also finished The Savior's Sister. I am not going to talk too much about that here because I've got an entire read-along on this channel, so if you're interested in knowing my thoughts about that, I have so many that it's multiple episodes, and it's still going on right now, so tune in every Monday for that. Alright guys, that's my 3-book for the price of 1 review. Did you read any indie books this December? If you're looking for another one to read, I have one. It's called The Wolf and the Hawk, and you can even listen to it on audio if you're interested. I will say of all of these audiobooks, I thought all of the narration was fine and very well done. None of the narrators stuck out to me as amazing, although I will say that the narrator for Red Winter did an excellent job of pronouncing all of the Japanese words, at least as best I could tell, stupid American that I am. Don't forget that I post new videos here on Mondays and Fridays. All the links to my social media are in the doobly-doo for ease of your clicking. Don't forget, if you want even more content from me, you can hop on over to my Patreon, where I have exclusive content not seen here on the regular channel, as well as more regular updates about what I'm doing with my own writing and when you can expect the sequel to The Wolf and the Hawk. And I will see all of you again next time with whatever it is I happen to be doing next time. Bye!
Well, hello, traveler. Why don't you sit right down over there and I'll tell you about some of the best patrons in the whole world, like Patrick, Anne Sophie, Callison, Ray, Artemis, Shelby, Zaire, Jesper, Irene, Scribbling Cat, Savvy, Jenny, Amanda, Lisa, and Lennox. Why, I bet you've never heard of a better group of patrons in your whole life.
Raindrops on roses and whiskers on kittens, bright copper kettles and warm woolen mittens, brown paper packages tied up with strings. These are a few of my favorite things.